there, folks. Welcome back to Succinct Psychology, or as we like to call it, Succinct. My name is Jaia Hendrickson, and this video is going to be a continuation of my previous video covering Chapter 10 in Principles of Social Psychology, looking at aggression. So aggression is controlled in large part by the older part of the brain known as the amygdala. And the amygdala is a brain region responsible for regulating our perceptions of and our reactions to aggression and fear. The amygdala has connections with other body systems related to fear, including the sympathetic nervous system, facial responses, the processing of smells, and the release of neurotransmitters related to stress and aggression. In addition to helping us experience fear, the amygdala also helps us learn from situations that create fear. The amygdala is activated in response to positive outcomes, but also to negative ones, and particularly to stimuli that we see as threatening and fear-arousing. When we experience events that are dangerous, the amygdala stimulates the brain to remember the details of the situation so that we may avoid them in the future. The amygdala is activated when we look at facial expressions of other people who are experiencing fear or when we're exposed to members of racial outgroups. Although the amygdala helps us perceive and respond to danger, and this may lead us to aggress, other parts of the brain serve to control and inhibit our aggressive tendencies. One mechanism that helps us control our negative emotions and aggression is a neural connection between the amygdala and regions of the prefrontal cortex. Hormones are also important in creating aggression, and most important in this regard is the male sex hormone testosterone, which is associated with increased aggression in both animals and humans. Research conducted on a variety of animals has found a strong correlation between levels of testosterone and aggression. And though this relationship seems to be weaker among humans than animals, it is still significant. Perhaps not surprisingly, research has found that the consumption of alcohol increases aggression. In fact, excessive alcohol consumption is involved in a majority of violent crimes, including rape and murder. The evidence is very clear, both from correlational research designs and from experiments in which participants are randomly assigned to either ingest alcohol or not ingest alcohol, that alcohol increases the likelihood that people will respond aggressively to provocations. Even though people who aren't normally aggressive may react with even people who aren't aggressive may react aggressively when they're intoxicated. Alcohol increases aggression for a couple of reasons. For one, alcohol disrupts executive functions, which are the cognitive abilities that help us plan, organize, reason, achieve goals, control emotions, and inhibit behavioral tendencies. Executive functioning occurs in the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain that allows us to control our aggression. Alcohol, therefore, reduces the ability of the person who has consumed it to inhibit his or her aggression. Acute alcohol consumption is more likely to facilitate aggression in people with low rather than high executive functioning abilities. Secondly, when people are intoxicated, they become more self-focused and less aware of the social situation, a state known as alcohol myopia. We might normally notice the presence of a police officer or other people around us, which would remind us that being aggressive is not appropriate, but when we're drunk, we're less aware of this. The narrowing of the attention that occurs when we're intoxicated also prevents us from being aware of the negative outcomes of our aggression. When we're sober, we realize that being aggressive may produce retaliation as well as a host of other problems, but we're less likely to be aware of these potential consequences when we've been drinking. If I were to ask you about the times that you've been aggressive, you'd probably tell me that many of them occurred when you were angry, in a bad mood, frustrated, in pain, or sick. And you'd be right. We're much more likely to aggress when we're experiencing negative emotions. When we're feeling ill, when we get a poor grade on an exam, or when our car doesn't start. So in short, anytime when we're angry or frustrated, we're likely to have many unpleasant thoughts and feelings, and these are likely to lead to violent behavior. Aggression is caused in large part by the negative emotions that we experience as a result of the aversive events that occur to us and by our negative thoughts that accompany them. One kind of negative effect that increases arousal when we're experiencing it is frustration. Frustration occurs when we feel that we're not obtaining the important goals that we've set for ourselves. We get frustrated when our computer crashes while we're writing an important paper. when we feel that our social relationships aren't going well, or when our schoolwork is going poorly. How frustrated we feel is also determined in large part by social comparison. If we can make downward comparisons with important others in which we see ourselves as doing well or better than they are, then we're less likely to feel frustrated. But when we're forced to make upward comparisons with others, we may feel more frustration. When we receive a poor grade than our classmate received, or when we get paid less than our coworkers, this can be frustrating to us. Although frustration is one cause of the negative affect that can lead to aggression, there are other sources as well. In fact, anything that leads to discomfort or negative emotions can increase aggression. For instance, working in extremely high temperatures is known to increase aggression. When we're hot, we're more aggressive. Griffith and Veitch in 1971 had students complete questionnaires either in rooms in which the heat was at normal temperature or in rooms in which the temperature was at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. What they found was that the students in the latter condition expressed significantly more hostility. Of course, negative emotions don't always lead to aggression toward the source of our frustration. If we get a bad grade from a teacher or a ticket from a police officer, we're unlikely to directly aggress towards him or her. Rather, we may displace our aggression onto others, and particularly towards others who seem to be similar to the source of our actual frustration. Displaced aggression occurs when negative emotions caused by one person trigger aggression toward a different person. A recent meta-analysis has found clear evidence that people who are provoked but are unable to retaliate against the person who provoked them are more aggressive towards an innocent other person, and particularly toward the other person who is similar in appearance to the true source of the provocation. Have you ever tried to yell really loud, hit a pillow, or kick something when you're angry with the hopes that doing so will release your aggressive tendencies? Catharsis is the idea that engaging in less harmful aggressive actions will reduce the tendency to aggress later in a more harmful way. It was mentioned as a way of decreasing violence by the Greek philosopher Aristotle, and it was an important part of the theories of Sigmund Freud. Many people believe in the idea of catharsis. Russell Arms and Bibby in 1995 reported that 2/3 of the participants they surveyed believed in aggression, and they agreed with statements that suggested that participating in or observing aggressive sports or other aggressive activities was a good way to reduce one's violent urges or aggressive urges. People who believe in the value of catharsis use it because they think that in doing so will make them feel better. The belief in catharsis leads people to engage in popular techniques such as venting and cathartic therapy, even though numerous studies have shown that these approaches are not effective. Yet, it is true that reducing negative affect and arousal can reduce the likelihood of aggression. For instance, if we're able to distract ourselves from our negative emotions or our frustration by doing something else rather than ruminating on it, then we'll be less likely to aggress. However, as far as social psychologists have been able to determine, attempting to remove negative emotions by engaging in or observing other aggressive activities, so the idea of catharsis, simply does not work. Some aggression is learned through modeling the violence that we see around us every day. For instance, Albert Bandura demonstrated that children learn new aggressive behaviors by observing aggressive models. Bandura argued that we don't just imitate the specific behaviors that we see, but that viewing aggression changes our schemas and our attitudes about aggression. Watching a parent hit the other parent may not only increase the child's likelihood of hitting, but it may also increase his or her belief that hitting is okay and that hitting isn't one way to solve our problems. Modeling teaches new ideas about aggression and can help explain why exposure to violence increases aggressive behaviors in the long run. Modeling is particularly problematic for children who grow up in violent families. These children are not only victims of aggression, but they also see violence inflicted against their siblings and their parents. Because children learn how to be parents in large part by modeling their own parents' behavior, it's no surprise that there's a strong correlation between family violence and violence as an adult. Children who witness their parents being violent or who are themselves abused are more likely as adults to inflict abuse on their partners and their children. In turn, their own children are also more likely to interact violently with each other and to aggress against their parents. So this picture here is a picture from one of Albert Bandura's famous studies with Bobo the doll, in which he had some children observe some adults go into the room with this doll, and the adults would either interact aggressively with this doll, punching it, kicking it, hitting it, or they would interact calmly with it. And what they found was that afterwards they would have the children go into the room and interact with the doll as well. And they found that the children who observed the aggressive adults rather than the calm adults were more likely to aggress and hit that Bobo doll violently, aggressively, and such. Alright folks, this is going to conclude my second video covering Chapter 10 in Principles of Social Psychology, looking at aggression. I hope you guys found it informative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.